Today we have a special guest among us. His name is Stephen, and he is the lead DevOps engineer. For those of you who do not know about, I also know him. So I hope it's.
I will, yeah.
Graduate.
Yep. The whole time.
On that note, you can start and tell us about yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. You guys are doing a great job with the BBA. I don't know if you know this, but I was actually the president of the BBA and a member for a few years when I was in the BIT program. So it's great to see how far you guys have taken it. My presentation today, it's going to be pretty lighthearted. The goal of it, though, I just kind of want to maybe share a few tidbits of information, and if anyone can take anything away from it, that'd be awesome. But it's going to be a story about my journey from, going into the intro to BIT program through BIT, and then into my professional life at Lotlinks. So let's get right into it. I will warn you that I finished it today, so I haven't memorized everything perfectly. So here's what I'm going to talk about. The first slide, I'm going to tell you why I'm qualified to be giving this talk. And then I'm going to go into my story, which is perhaps a little bit interesting. I know DevOps isn't a topic that's really covered in the BIT program. So we're going to talk about what DevOps is. From there, I'm going to go into career advice. I'm going to tell you how to be good. And then if there's any questions, we can kind of open the floor and just have like a conversation at the end. So why am I qualified to give this talk? I guess first and foremost, I'm the lead DevOps engineer at Lotlinks. I do all the hiring. I look at resumes. I develop people. I plan all the work. If you take a look here, that's an actual screen cap of our Kanban board today. So that's the work I plan and delegate out to the team. I'm a BIT grad, so I'm a BIT student, just like everybody else here. Former member of the BBA. Like I said, I lead a department, hiring. I do all the onboarding. I onboard people, technical people across the company. I plan work. I check work. I follow up. And basically, I'm in charge of a multinational company's web cloud infrastructure, like top to bottom. My story. So the BIT program was my second time in college. In my previous life, I was a chef. In 2015, I retired from cooking. Decided it wasn't for me. It was tough. I didn't like it anymore. And in 2016, I took a year off, basically. I didn't work very seriously. I just did some soul searching, tried to figure out what it is I wanted to do, because what I was doing certainly wasn't it. I was kind of working a casual job, and a guy that I had met there and become good friends with entered the BIT program. And, I asked him what it was. He's like, oh, yeah, business IT. And I was like, oh, you know what? I could fix printers. Maybe that's what I'll do. Because I had no idea what it was, really. Lo and behold, here I am today. It was actually a whole lot more than that, a lot cooler, a lot more interesting. The world of tech is very, very cool. 2017, I started iBit. I wasn't confident in myself at the time necessarily to take like the test to go right into BIT. I don't know if iBit still even exists. So to kind of circumvent that, I decided to go into the iBit program, which in hindsight was like really valuable. There was a course in it that was basically like, it taught you how to be a good student. And before that point in my life, I hadn't necessarily been a good student. So it kind of got me started on the right foot, into taking the BIT program very seriously and, doing myself due diligence. Start of the year was BIT, summer break, and then back for semester 1 in the fall. 2018, did semesters 2 and 3 here. as you all know, the semesters get progressively harder, 1, 2, and 3, and three's a grinder, What I will say is 5 is easy, very easy. So if you have a chance to like work a part-time job, work more than a part-time job, stay on with your company, if you like do a co-op, take the opportunity. But 2019, I lucked in. I was, one of the groups that got to start a co-op at the start of the year, so I could take my term longer than 4 months, which was awesome. I got to work January through August at Lotlinks, which was interesting. I kind of touch on this a bit later, but I'll talk about it now too. When I was in college, I was going to be a full stack web dev. That's what I studied. That's what I did. That's what I worked on. That's what my personal projects were. I was building front ends, back ends. I learned Rails. I knew Ruby well. All these things. I get this co-op, and they're like, you're gonna be a Java dev. I'm like, I'll take what I can get. I'll be a Java dev. I show up on my first day, January 7th, 2019. I was like one of the first people at the office. I don't even think they were expecting me. I get there, and they're like, here's a laptop, install Linux on it for yourself. Oh, okay. That's how it's going to be. Figured that out later in the day. They were like, hey, you're not going to be a backend Java dev. We're going to have you work DevOps for us. And I was like, well, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know what DevOps is, so you're going to have to teach me. And they said, yeah, sure enough, we will teach you. And they did. I was fortunate enough to work under another Bit grad. His name's Ian McPhillips. He'd graduated a few years prior. Right out of school, he went into Northfield IT. I'm sure you're familiar with Northfield. They have a good relationship with the college. He did his first stint there, and then he went to Lotlinks, and I worked with Ian for a number of years. Ian, extremely smart, awesome sysadmin, knows Linux inside and out. Great guy to learn from. And then in the fall, everything ended in August. Everything was great. Back to school in the fall. I was prepared for another semester 3. Like I was, I can't work. I just want to focus on school. School starts, and it turns out it's like very easy in the 5th semester. So I reached back out to Lotlinks, and I was like, hey, if you guys need any help, I'd like be happy to work part-time or something, like if we can come to an agreement. And I was extremely fortunate to land a job as a contractor with them doing the same thing I was doing, but I got to pick when I worked. I billed them hours. So if I had the easy week at school, I could crank out 30 hours. If it was a hard week, I'd be like, sorry guys, can't touch work. So it was just the absolute, best situation I could be in that 5th semester. And again, if you're at a company that would welcome that kind of thing, I would encourage you to try to explore that opportunity going into your 5th semester. That's a great way to foster a relationship and a great way to turn a co-op into like a full-time job afterward. Not super common, but if it's there, certainly take it. For the start of 2020, January 1st, I guess would be the official date. I signed my contract and I became a junior DevOps developer, which didn't really mean anything. It was just doing the same thing I was doing before. But kept at that for a long time. I was patient. And the company was going through some, like management things about naming job titles and stuff. So I was actually a junior dev for almost 2 years, I think. So sometime in 2021, I was no longer junior. And interesting things were happening in the office. Like Ian, extremely technical, did not like to plan work very much, just kind of like to put his head down and go. So there were some opportunities for me there to, look at planning my own work. Instead of having work just given to me, I learned to find work and create work and plan work for myself. I did a pretty good job with that. And at the end of 2021, I was able to advocate for myself to be able to hire on a co-op student. It wasn't from Red River. My boss, he's a U of M grad, so he wanted to go with that program, but I was able to get my own co-op student from U of M, and they started for me at the start of the year. And I had 4 months with them, and awesome experience. It was really great to be able to teach and to gain confidence in leadership and my skills by working through someone, which is a whole other ballgame. And then I I guess I impressed them enough that when Ian decided it was time to leave and go work in crypto, I was offered the DevOps team lead position when he left. So, I was in the right place at the right time for a lot of things, but that was kind of my story in a nutshell, going from retiring from cooking to running a DevOps team. What even is DevOps? You guys still do lots of work at .NET, right? You ever deploy anything? Or do you just run code on your computer? What's that? Local host, right? That's not how things work in the real world. You might do testing on your computer, but there's a whole bunch of challenges that come with that when you talk about professionally. Like your computer, and your computer might all be set up different. So your testing locally might produce different results. So typically when you move into the field, testing's done kind of in the cloud in a reproducible environment. So what even is DevOps? The quote here, and these are just copied and pasted from GitLab. GitLab's the best. It's a combination of software developers and operations ops. So in this context, software developers are the ones that are actually writing the code, and operations would be like an infrastructure team or like a DevOps team like I'm on, the ones that actually are in charge of running cloud infrastructure. So that's just how that context works. And it's defined as a software engineering methodology, which aims to integrate the work of software development and software operations teams by facilitating a culture of collaboration and shared responsibility. It's different now than it was a few years ago. DevOps isn't super new anymore, but way back in the day, companies might push new code out into production once a month. A company that adopts DevOps and does it well will push out new code into production dozens, if not hundreds of times a day. So, that's an example of how you can accelerate, using DevOps here. But in the bottom right there, that's the DevOps life cycle. Typically you would start with like planning. So you plan work. Everything's like agile and stuff these days. You take your classes on that. It's annoying, but it actually really comes in handy. And then the work happens, and that's writing the code. And then when you write the code, verify is like testing, linting, making sure everything is meeting the standards. Packaging is taking all of those lines of code in that file and turning it into something that actually runs a program. You then create a release, which is like a system of versioning. So, let's say version 2.2 works great. Version 2.3 broken. Okay, let's roll back to 2.2. So that's kind of how releasing works. Configuring is actually configuring the infrastructure. Old school would be back in the day, server racks, and you would deploy your stuff to co-location. So you would rent server rack space from a company. That's long gone. Cloud computing is where it's at. AWS, GCP, Azure, great things to know. I'm an expert in AWS personally. But the next step from the co-location would be just deploying one application to one cloud server. You can size them differently and have the right size for an application, but that's kind of the gist of it. And then fast forward to today, when containerization and Kubernetes rule DevOps. So, configuring now looks like configuring a Kubernetes cluster, telling it how to scale, when to scale, configuring a myriad of different things on it, stuff like DNS, all sorts of different monitoring tools, Prometheus, this, that. We're not going to get too deep into that, but, that's configuring. And then there's monitoring. So I just mentioned Prometheus. Prometheus is like a cloud native monitoring tool used specifically for Kubernetes, just because the way workloads run in Kubernetes versus like an old cloud server, they're just very different. Everything in Kubernetes is ephemeral. The life cycle of a container might be minutes, it might be hours, it might be days. Whereas an EC2 instance is up and running, indefinitely. So that's kind of how that looks. So DevOps, what am I in charge of in my department is basically all of the cloud. I'm in charge of Azure, I'm in charge of GCP, I'm in charge of AWS. I am responsible for how much money we spend. So I need to, put into place things like cost controls. I need to audit, make sure things are sized appropriately. Does that thing even need to exist? That kind of work. If anything breaks, if a program breaks, if an instance breaks, that's me and my team. We handle all the monitoring, so we install the programs onto everything that do the monitoring, that inform, other programs or services like PagerDuty is like a software as a service that is really good at integrating with different monitoring platforms like Isinga, like Prometheus. We're in charge of like CI/CD, which is really important. So CI is continuous integration, CD is continuous deployment or continuous development. CI is integrating code from your computer into a repo. So you're pushing your code up to the repo. CD is the packaging and deploying of that basically. And there's deployment and development. One is when you push code, everything else is automated. It just goes into production. And the other one is after you push code, you want a dev to click a button to manually do the deploy. So that's kind of the difference between those. But I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of what DevOps is. If you were into like the web dev courses and you set up databases or you set something up on a cloud server, I forget which one they recommend now, but that's kind of just like the very start, the very tip of what DevOps is. So if those are things you enjoyed, if you enjoyed setting up the database, if you liked spinning up a Linux instance, if you like playing around with different types of operating systems in virtual machines, I think DevOps is definitely a career avenue to pursue. I can say that DevOps typically pays pretty well as well. So if that's a thing you're interested in making money, you can definitely go and do that by being in DevOps. If you're looking for things to practice on or have fun with, if you want to explore DevOps, look into GitLab. You can do lots of really fun things for free on GitLab. Look into setting up Minikube on your computer. You can set up just like a local Kubernetes cluster on your computer and play around with that. Learn Docker, understand how to containerize an application. It's very complicated at first, but after you wrap your head around it, it's like super duper simple. But I don't want to go on for too long. That's DevOps. Now let's talk about career advice. And I guess first and foremost, I want to make an acknowledgement. Before I give this advice, I just want to acknowledge that I understand that I'm a white male. And I know that the experiences I've had may not be the same for all peoples. In saying this, I believe there's work being done to make tech more inclusive, but work is still needed. I thought it's important to acknowledge that. So number one, career advice. You want to get a job, you want to do well, you actually want to land a job, don't be lazy. I think this probably goes without saying. But what I mean is don't be lazy all the time. There's some good things that can come from being lazy. Automate everything you can. If you need to do a thing more than twice, automate it. That's a good rule of thumb. Also, outsource everything you can. This doesn't mean like, buying someone on Fiverr. This is things like taking notes if you're watching a presentation, so you don't need to remember them. You can refer to your notes. Same thing with like use a calendar, set reminders up for yourself. Don't let those things live in your head. There's a lot of different outsourcing you can do for things like that, but just by not clouding your head with remembering these little trivial things, it allows you to really flourish. So don't be lazy, work hard, but be lazy and set yourself up for success at the same time. Number two, I think health is very important. All forms of health. Make sure you're taking care of your mental health. Mental health is very important. Having had been a student, I can tell you that it's easy to let it slip while you're in school. So be conscious of that. Do things that are going to make you feel better. Physical health too. Get out for a walk. If you want to exercise, do that. Eating healthy, I can tell you that those things will all make you feel better. And your emotional health too. So make sure you have friends and you're talking and doing all the things that are good for your emotional health. So that's also very important. Now more into the actual like advice part. At this point, I'm kind of talking from you're gonna be applying for jobs, right? This is where we're at in this point of the conversation. Set yourself apart from others. So I'm talking from someone who I look at resumes and I choose who I interview. And one of the biggest things that I find that set resumes apart are people who have completed projects and show them off in their resume. So if your resume is digital, which it should be, you should have a link in your resume that links to your project. Don't just link your source code, deploy your project, and whoever's reading the resume, they can click on that and go to it. That impresses people. You don't need to worry about being original. You're not going to be original. Everything's been done before a million times. What's important here is that you're taking it upon yourself to learn something. You're completing this task start to finish, and you're learning like what it's like to actually deploy something and get that work done. And that's a whole thing into itself. But it's impressive. And you get bonus points. The cooler whatever you're showing off is, and the better it works, the more impressed the person looking at their resumes is going to be. So, in the world of competing against other people, that really helps set yourself apart. Especially, think about in the last few years, companies typically hired locally, right? So Winnipeg companies hired people from Winnipeg. Maybe they would bring people in, but everything was in their own market. COVID happens, remote work becomes commonplace. So now instead of competing against the city of Winnipeg, you're competing against the world, 8 billion people. So now you need to make yourself stand out that much more. And doing these extra things, these extra projects and showing them off really goes a long way. So if you do these projects and you actually land the interview, your interviewers are going to like 100% talk to you about your project, and they're going to ask you what you learned. And that's just a really good time to talk about, maybe how you failed a little bit, and how you learned from it and were able to overcome it. So just do the extra projects, show them off. It's okay to show them off. Work hard on it. It'll go a long way. All right. Where are we here? Get your foot in the door. So when you're ready to start working, the number one most important thing is getting experience. That's your priority. If you're skilled and fortunate enough to maybe pick from a few different places, that'll happen to some people in the program. Good for you. Not everybody's going to have that opportunity. If you can get a job kind of doing what you want to do, take it. Get the experience. That is invaluable. Maybe you're not going to make the salary you want to initially right off the bat. That's okay. Maybe your work-life balance sucks for a while. That's okay. Those things are going to come with time, and those things are only going to come with experience. So when you're out there getting your first job, just get your foot in the door and actually get the jobs, get experience, then you get the bargaining, and you can start bargaining for more money and getting those jobs that allow you to enjoy your life a bit more. Networking. I'm not talking about Cisco here, I'm talking about knowing people. I'm sure there's some stats out there that I could spit out that are gonna say like most jobs come from your network. I don't know what they are. I didn't have a chance to look them up, unfortunately. But networking is what I call playing the game. And it's this whole like corporate like business talk kind of thing. Sometimes it may feel a little dishonest or fake, but it's all part of it. So don't be afraid of that. Have having a good network and strong connections is important. It can get your foot in the door in the first place, or maybe you're at a company for 5 years and you really like it, and then maybe the company sells and you're in a position where you want to change jobs. Maybe someone you worked with for 3 years, the first 3 years went on to a different company, and they're looking for someone just like you. You're going to get that job through that person a lot easier than you are just like hammering out a million resumes on like Indeed or something. So I can't speak to how important networking is. Get out there, go to events, talk to people, message people on LinkedIn, ask them questions. People are super friendly. Yeah, just very important to keep and maintain a good network. And be open. So I wanted to be a web dev. My heart was set on being a web dev. That was it. And I'm not a web dev because I was open. And I wasn't afraid to, take on this opportunity that wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but it worked out. I think honestly, in hindsight, I like DevOps a lot more than I would have liked web development. So maybe you're in the Bit program right now and you really liked your database programs. Maybe you're an ace at SQL. And you're hoping for, like a back-end .NET job. Maybe you're going to end up as a data analyst somewhere. If you have great skills with SQL and you know your way around databases, data is big. Data is huge right now, and the need for data analysts is massive. So, these skills you're getting, are transferable in interesting ways. Maybe you love .NET. C# is your favorite thing. But when you graduate, maybe you never touch Windows ever again, So just keep your mind open, and a lot of good can come from that. And finally, create your own opportunities. No one is going to be more interested in your own success than yourself. No one's going to hand you anything on a silver platter. No one's going to do anything for you that way. If you're out there and you're working, you're going to be the one that comes up with that awesome solution. You're going to be the forward thinker that solves a problem that no one else has yet. You're going to find these things and complete them. So don't sit and wait for things to happen for you. Go and get them and do them yourself. How to be good. This one's fun. So you have a job. You're on the job. This is my advice on how to be a good employee. Number one, be a great colleague. Be friendly. Don't be a jerk. You don't know it all. Don't act like it. Don't be annoying. Listen to your boss. Be on time. Offer to help. Get involved with extracurricular work activities. Stand up for yourself. Don't get taken advantage of. Finish your projects in a timely fashion. And if you don't naturally understand social cues, read about them, get to know them as best you can, because a lot of times if, I've seen situations where people maybe don't get social cues and it is detrimental to them. So that's not a thing I ever hear people talk about. So look into that, learn it, embrace it. There's opportunity there for you if you, are one of the people who don't maybe pick up on social cues that well. Number two, make your boss's life easier. Your boss is busy. They have a million things on the go. Try to find ways to make their job easier. Sometimes it may be very obvious. Sometimes it might not be so obvious. Hopefully you have a good enough relationship with your boss where you can have a conversation where you can offer to take things off their plate. Or you may talk to them and be able to pick out things that you can kind of get done that are going to help them out that maybe don't make their way into tickets. So people really appreciate that, and that goes a long way. Conversely, do not make your boss's life harder under any circumstances. Just don't. Don't screw things up. Don't go above them. Don't go behind their back. Maybe they're not the best, but yeah, just don't piss them off. I think that one's pretty obvious, but you got to throw it in there. Questions. Extremely important. Extremely. I'm going to talk about maybe some tips about questions, because asking questions is like a really big deciding factor. You can figure out how smart someone is right away by the kind of questions they ask, how they ask them, and who they ask them to. And being cognizant of this early on is probably going to help you guys as well. So first, don't ever ask the same question twice. Take notes, right? People don't want to do work more than once. People don't want to answer the same question twice. So don't ask the same person the same thing twice. If you guys have a Slack at work, you can create a chat with yourself, and you can use the chat as yourself as like a database of things you learn, or you can copy and paste into your own thing, and you can search, you can control F your own chat, and you can look up things easily. So that's a good way of storing questions that you ask in Slack. And maybe before you ask the question, check the documentation. Maybe the docs are in the file. Maybe you have a knowledge database, something like Confluence or like a wiki. Check there first before you ask, because maybe someone's already answered the question. Try not to ask too many questions. And that's kind of a hard one, but and there's a time and a place for lots of questions. Like if you're entering into like a very new breadth of knowledge or kind of work for yourself. Like let's say you finish one project and you're picking up a new technology at the start, great time to ask lots of questions. But again, don't ask a million questions all day long, because your questions take up someone else's time and then their work stops to answer you. So try to think of that. But having said that, don't let yourself get stuck in a place for too long. Someone would rather answer a question and get you out of a stuck place than have you just sit there and like spin your wheels for days. So understanding what the equilibrium there is in when to ask questions and like when to try and learn yourself, that's very important. Yeah, being able to critically think your way through problems and learn is very important. Which takes me right into learning to learn, which is the most valuable skill you're going to learn at school. Like right now, you guys are paying money to learn how to learn. A job, it might say, hey, we need a React dev that needs to know MongoDB super well. And maybe you don't know React, you know Vue.js really well. Maybe you don't know Mongo, but you know MySQL. If you're awesome, the employer is going to pick up on that and they're going to want you on their team. And then it's on you to be able to learn these technologies. And that is a skill, and it's hard, but that's what's going to get you through. Because there's going to be a lot of things, a lot of new technologies. Technology doesn't ever slow down. It's going to be new things coming all the time. Yeah, make sure you understand how to learn. A good way to look at it is, on Friday, if you learn about a new tech, you should be able to have a conversation about it on Monday and not sound dumb. Just little tidbit there. Value. So you're going to work for a company, and the company is a business, and businesses are all about making money, and that's what a business is. A business is an entity that makes money. Value is an important thing in this world, in the world of business. Like it sounds weird that we're talking about, as human beings, giving ourselves or assigning a value to ourselves. But it speaks a lot in the world of business if you create value for yourself to your employer. Create value for yourself by doing good things. Be too good. Be too good at writing documentation and being the one that actually goes and writes the docs in the knowledge base. Don't be the one that writes obfuscated code that's confusing so no one else can read it. Think about, how can I be better than the person that started in the department before me? Create value by being as good as you possibly can be, and doing whatever it takes for you to succeed. And finally, integrity. Very important personality trait, goes a long way. A few things on integrity. If you say you're going to do something to someone at work, do it. Always. Don't ever forget. Always do the thing you say you're going to do and finish it. Don't half-ass it. Some more to integrity. It's easy to maybe get caught up in like talking poorly about people, or getting involved in like workplace gossip. I'm going to tell you to just like steer clear of that. Don't let yourself get caught up into these silly conversations about people. You're better than that. Don't get caught up like bashing your company. But having said that, hold them accountable. Okay, hold your company accountable to things they say and make sure they have integrity too. Yeah, and if you follow those 7 easy steps, you're going to be good. That's more or less it for the presentation. You're welcome to fire off a million questions, start a conversation. Hey. Oh, Lotlinks. I forgot about Lotlinks. Of course. So Lotlinks, as a company, what we do is we do business with automotive retailers in the States. We only do work out of America, and we help car dealers sell cars on the internet. It sounds simple, but there's a whole lot of crazy tech that goes into it. If you go on your computer right now and you do a Google search for my Google ad profile, like we do a lot of work with that. That's going to return, all the things that Google knows about you. We use that so we know these things about you. We can tell if you're actually going to buy a car or if you're just window shopping. And people pay us to send good traffic to them. So if you're a company, let's say you're a Ford dealer and you're selling a 2020 F-150, we're going to know if someone looking for trucks is going to want to buy this car. And if they are, we're going to send that person to your actual vehicle-specific page on your website. It's all tracked with VIN numbers. So we say we're an advertising company because that's the product that we sell, but really at the core, we're a data company. We basically know every single car that's for sale in the United States at any given time. We know everything about it. We know how many doors it has, what color it is, what kind of car it is, everything about it. We know about it. We know when it gets sold. We know how much it gets sold for. We know how many days it sits on the lot. And we track all these things, and we don't ever get rid of data over time. So we help people sell cars, but we're a data company. To talk a little bit more about Lotlinks, we're distributed across Canada and the States. America is like the core of the business. So the actual like salespeople, they're all out of the United States. The Canadian side, we handle all the tech. So it started off with a Winnipeg and a Hamilton office in Canada. And through COVID, we got much more distributed. So we have people all the way from Newfoundland to Vancouver Island that work for us now in Canada. Something at the top of my head was something that I learned in like the last couple of weeks actually, and it's about like planning work. And this is a lot more to do if you're in a position where you plan work for yourself and you get to prioritize your own work. I can actually share this document with you. My boss sent it to me last week, and it was just like the best read. And what it was is it's like a framework for deciding what's important, and it gave some names to things. So there's like different kinds of work you can do that have like funny names. One of them is snacking. So if you're snacking, what you're doing is you're doing really little small tasks that feel good to do but are inconsequential. So that's snacking. There's preening. Preening is doing tasks that are low effort, low impact, but high visibility. And sometimes that can be important. Sometimes you might need to preen. Maybe you've been like way in the back end doing a lot of really unthankful work that no one ever really gets to see, and you want people to see you again. Maybe then it's time to preen, but don't always preen. Don't always look for those high flashy things. Then there's 4 ways to categorize work. There's low effort, low impact, high effort, high impact, high effort, low impact, and the other one. And you basically always want to do the low effort, high impact things first, because it's the easiest, highest impact things. From there, you go to high effort, high impact. And to take it a step further, you need to look at your work in your department as if there are things like existential threats. What can happen that can destroy your work? What can happen that can really screw the company? And in the case of me, infrastructure, there are things like I do have existential threats. There are things that can happen that can, potentially really throw a wrench in my job. So I was really focused for a long time on driving forward new tech. I put a lot of focus into adopting Kubernetes and developing Kubernetes and kind of migrating from the EC2 cloud instance into this new cloud native kind of thing. And in doing that, some older stuff kind of went by the wayside, and nothing's broken yet, but who's to say it won't? So my work changing going forward, my focuses for the actual things that I'm hitting the keyboard for are going to change from like driving the tech forward into maintaining and updating older tech we have that if it breaks will really ruin my day. How's that? Yeah, for sure.
Well, first of all, I want to thank once upon a time.
Yeah, it was probably about a year ago.
It was about yeah, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
I had a quick question. After
Yeah.
I think this was-
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used in the DevOps department, Ruby was our #1 scripting language. So I got like really quite proficient at writing Ruby code. And that directly translates into like Ruby on Rails. So like I wanted to be a web dev, right? So I can write Ruby code, I can write Ruby on Rails. So I could have, if I wanted to, pivoted back to web dev. I know there's shops in the city that use Rails. I could have explored that. I also, every single day of those 8 months, I was in the AWS console. So I got to know Amazon Web Services like really well. And cloud provider skills are like in extremely high demand. I didn't take it this far, but you can go and you can get like accreditations. You can become like an AWS like cloud practitioner. There's all these different levels you can attain. I could have taken some of that time to maybe get those and sorry, pardon me. Like I work for like a very small to mid-sized business, but if I wanted to maybe work at a really big business, large companies, enterprise, they really like to see things like that on resume. So maybe I want to go work at Oracle or something. They probably like to see that I have AWS accreditation. And it's never a bad thing, but it's always, what's the best way I can spend my time? And I didn't think going and getting those was necessarily for what I wanted to do the best thing for me. But yeah, I could have done lots of things with the skills I got.
I just want to say about Microsoft. I guess I have my follow-up question. Stephen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the first day thing. I give you a USB stick, install Linux. we walk you through it. It's actually for someone who's not used to Linux and working on Linux, it's really valuable to go through the experience, install a distro on your computer, and then install some of the things you need to do your job. Installing things on Linux is a lot different than Windows. I'm gonna tell you right now, Linux a million times better than Windows. Don't let anybody tell you different. And like packages and stuff is all very different. So learning that workflow, learning to do all of your work in the command line versus like a GUI, is valuable, especially, in the world of DevOps where, all of our work is scripting and, writing configs and whatnot. Yeah.
What,
This is Ubuntu. Yeah, I always try to run like whatever the newest one is, the newest like full release. They come out twice a year. I think this is 2210 or 2204. Let's see. You got to know all the hotkeys too. Yeah, so I think it's 2204. Usually I update that to remind me whatever they are, because there's been a million. Ubuntu doesn't use necessarily the newest kernels, but it's stable. It's rock solid stable. It's a Debian-based distro. I would say if you want to play around and learn Linux, Ubuntu is an awesome place to start. We run all of our cloud servers are all Ubuntu servers, every single one. So we back up our love for Ubuntu with actually using it. They have this neat concept called, like I said, a new distro comes out twice a year, a new Ubuntu one, and they have the concept of like these LTS versions, which is like long-term support, and those happen once every 2 years. So it was 1604 for a long time, and it was 1804, now 2004. I guess 2204 is probably the new LTS, come to think of it. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I can tell you I'm on call right now. Yeah. My computer's with me though, so if something breaks, we can fix it. Yeah, that exists. Like being on call is a thing. The more fleshed out and longer, and I would even go as far as saying better ran a company you work for, the less time you're going to spend on call, right? It's in a company's best interest to keep people off of call as much as they can, and then throw something back at them. Like GitLab as a company, like we really look up to, and we really like their values. They also document literally everything. So you can read the GitLab's like how to operate a company handbook online at the GitLab website. And we use a lot of their policies from there in our own stuff. Anyways, one of the things they do is if you go on call, the first day you come off a call, you take off. You get the day off, because being on call is intense, right? Like your beeper could go off, your phone could ping at any given time, middle of the night, doesn't matter, it doesn't care. Infrastructure doesn't care about you, it'll break whenever it wants to, right? But if you're in charge of the infrastructure, you're totally in control of how much things break by how good you do things and how you have your monitoring set up. To toot my own horn a little bit here, at the start of the year, we were getting roughly between 50 and 70 pages a week that were critical pages that would wake you up in the middle of the night. I took over the team in April, and I've dropped it down to an average of 4 a week. So if you're in that position, you can make your life better. But it is serious. Work-life balance is a thing. Yeah, it's hard. I've been woken up in the middle of the night and had a shit day the next day. It sucks. Is it worth it? It is. I learn a lot. I've learned a lot. I've gone from being not knowing how to install Linux to being a Linux power user and running a team over the course of 3 years. I was kind of thrown into the fire, and there's value in that. Why do we all work? What's the point of work? Why do you go to work? Exactly. The DevOps pays really well. Just gonna be forthcoming with that. Yeah, it's a good way to make lots of money, but it's hard. You need to make some concessions with your life, and you know it is what it is, but you get rewarded for it if you do it.
So I guess if you were to take us on as a co-op student or higher, I guess what in the year, how do you know in a year's time that
I wouldn't know before I hired you if you were going to be a right fit. You can tell so much about a person in the interview process, just like getting to know them. It doesn't matter if you're shy or not shy or outgoing. Those things I don't really think impact, how you're going to be as an employee. Looking at the way you treat school is interesting. Looking at all these like U of M, resumes. Do I really want to? This is a hot take here. Do I want to hire someone with perfect grades? What do you think? I wouldn't, because at some point there's going to be diminishing return on the amount of time you spend, right? What's the difference between an A- and an A+ in terms of the amount of time you need to spend doing that work? And in a professional world where things need to get done, things got to get done. And I appreciate things getting done and getting done well. But if someone finishes their work to an A- level, it's probably good enough. And I'd rather have them do 3 things than just 1 thing. And that's not like a hard written in stone thing, but you can kind of like tell if a person is how do I want to articulate this? Not OCD, but if someone just like needs to get things done 100% always, that's maybe not a great fit for my team. Some teams may love that. Some teams may thrive with that kind of person. There may be a team of those people, but on my team, no, we work fast, we get things done, we work hard. Just like having a conversation with someone, like being a good fit for the team, important, right? If you've gone through school and you're able to graduate, chances are you're smart enough to do any of these jobs. But are you the kind of person that someone wants on their team? Right. So if we have a conversation and we're in an interview and like we just get along, that's important, right? Like if I have 2 people and they're exactly the same and I just have like this vibe with one better, I'm going to hire the person that I vibe with better. Yep. Yeah, for sure. Sources. I would say you can read about it. There's lots of different interpretations of DevOps out there on the internet. I would, if you were to pick one source of truth, pick GitLab. GitLab is it's so good. Everything they do is so good. Their documentation is so good. Their products are amazing. I was actually able to run Lotlinks's like entire Git platform on GitLab for free for like 2 years, because all I had to do was bring my own Kubernetes clusters, integrate them with the GitLab SaaS platform, and like we did not pay for a couple of years. But then I think probably about 6 or 7 months ago, they were like, you can only have 5 users now, so we have to start paying. But yeah, GitLab's awesome. You can set up GitLab servers and use them if you want. So like a really good exercise that you could do is set yourself up an instance of GitLab. You can look into a technology called Helm. Helm is the package manager for Kubernetes, and it allows you to install really complicated things that have a lot of moving parts, like a GitLab installation, really quite easily. And you're going to learn a lot doing that, because you're going to need to figure out how to set up a Kubernetes cluster, which is very hard if it's production level enterprise, but just for yourself, not that hard. You can set up Minikube and run it locally. There's a thing called K3s. So if you have like a little like home server system or like some Raspberry Pis, you can set up K3s, which is just a really lightweight version of Kubernetes, and you can run your GitLab that way. If you want it to be like a BBA, like super person, you could raise money, get yourself cloud servers and give the school or the BBA their own GitLab instance. And then you would give everyone a place to like push their code to throughout school. Everything's private by default. There's no money gating privacy. So you can set it up so everything is private by default and no one has access to anyone else's code. Yeah, and then you can use like Amazon S3 as your storage backend. And then you can configure S3 to encrypt data at rest by default. So yeah, a lot of good learning, a lot of fun stuff there. Yeah. If I could go back in time, I would have done that. Anything else? Oh, of course. Movie night.